See, we're live. Okay, now we're live. Okay, welcome to today's LinkedIn Live conversation. We'll be continuing our Future of Contingent Workforce series, A Buyer's Perspective. We'll cover what buyers are prioritizing in 2026 for the contingent workforce in the year ahead. There's been a lot of changes and disruptions leading into 2026, from shifting geopolitics to advances in AI, as well as inflation and the shifting behaviors of consumers. Needless to say, it's keeping corporate buyers busy on the challenges of an ever dynamic changing landscape. Having said this, we have an amazing group of panelists today for our beginning of the year check-in from a buyer's perspective. Our special guests are Kelly Inkowski, Senior Compliance Manager at SanDisk, Chris Farmer, Strategic Sourcing, Global Workforce Strategy at Riot Games, Jeff Dabuski, Global TA Lead, Contingent Workforce Strategy and Planning for Intuitive Surgical, Natalie Javid, Head of Global CW at Snowflake, Dr. Jeremy Agler, Director Enterprise Programs Procurement at Raymond James and Associates, and then Jake Galbraith, Director of Strategic Sourcing at FINRA. Welcome, everyone.
Hey there.
So let's start off with, as a buyer, what are your priorities for contingent workforce for 2026? Jake, do you want to start?
Sure. I think easily said, right? We want to continue to, stay on top of market trends, find talent, as efficiently and effectively as possible. I know our team everything about last year was inconsistent. So we were trying to pivot at every turn, stay ahead of things. So we want to go into this year, continue to be proactive, looking for ways to automate, actually implement, true AI, figure out how, it can start to benefit us, take, ease the hiring manager burden, and, free up my team to do more strategic things as well.
Okay, great. And Jeff?
I think, quite honestly, we're looking at how do we scale at the speed of business, especially in our long tail countries where we have low volume, but obviously the necessity to serve there, and making sure that our compliance is harmonized globally, especially with the escalation and elevation of worker fraudulent profiles, and just the return to office is really creating some disruption there as well. So 3 things top of mind that we're hopefully going to tackle quite well in 26.
Okay, great. And Chris, congratulations on the new role.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so what are your priorities?
Yeah, for me, honestly, the first quarter and a half is just making sure I understand what exactly I've gotten myself into. This is a different world. I've gone from tech to video games and esports, and that's presents a lot of really interesting and fun, but kind of complex challenges. So really, I'm just trying to dive in and understand every little nuance I can before I start making changes.
Yeah, are your boys excited about the change?
Yeah, they're obsessed with video games, so they're very stoked.
I love it. And Kelly?
So our priorities are, they do mirror obviously what everybody else has said as well, but ours are a little bit different at SanDisk, just primarily because we really became our own entity just a year ago. It was last February that we split off from Western Digital. So we're still in kind of that phase of figuring out what we don't know and scaling our program, and then also trying to balance that with becoming more strategic instead of just, putting out those day-to-day fires. But I would also say, I'm the compliance manager. I would also say keeping everyone in compliance is, top of mind as well.
Okay, great. And then Natalie?
Yeah, I mean, similar, our 2 main focuses this year is just continuing to elevate our program as being seen as a strategic lever. So we are doubling down on those, core relationships with our stakeholders, and really trying to build the relationships with talent acquisition, our people partners, finance, procurement, all, you name it, right? Those big key partners, so that we can continue to grow and scale this program and be seen as that strategic lever, and have the business units that aren't tapping into us in that capacity come to us for that and be a part of the planning, their strategic planning. And then another major component for us is modernizing our technology. So we're looking at what are we utilizing, how are we utilizing it, where can we be more efficient, you know, everyone's looking at AI and how can we implement AI? What is happening within our ecosystem with the
Mhm.
partners that serve our program? How are
Yeah.
they utilizing technology? And then the underlay to all of that is always for us user experience, and how, are we improving that experience for every aspect of the ecosystem?
I love it. I think I'm going to jump to one of the things that Jeff said in his to start with. You talked about return to office program. How is that impacting your contingent workers? And I'd love to hear from all of you, but let's start with Jeff on that concept.
Sure. So it has caused some disruption, quite honestly. I think that even prior to COVID, obviously utilizing a number of contingent workers and consultants, it was traditional to have remote or even hybrid schedules. COVID obviously really pushed that to the limit across the board for our entire workforce. Now, slowly but surely, we are in a return to office mode, and our requisitions are being sent out with requirements for on-site. That's creating a bit of an exacerbation, obviously, in Sunnyvale, California, where talent still is very, very tight, as well as Peachtree Corners outside of Atlanta, specifically in the US for us. So really trying to take a look at how do we help managers navigate the requirement to be on site, to be provisioned and collaborative in person, while also really squeezing that funnel pretty tight on what the available talent pool is to come into the office.
So Jeff, just like specifically for Silicon Valley, like if one company does it, but the others don't, then it really puts a limit to what kind of talent you get. So are you seeing that a lot of your peers are doing that as well, or is that because that creates a huge challenge?
We do. It's an interesting dichotomy, especially if you're even following the headlines about the number of tech layoffs that have happened over the past year. You would think that there might be a number of individuals available and out there, even if you are at a disadvantage about being one of the leads for return to office. But as we kind of take a look at the greater Silicon Valley area, lots of companies doing return to office at a minimum to a hybrid schedule. And we're not necessarily ahead or behind. I think we're solid in the middle. It's just really, quite honestly, finding individuals that are willing to come into a hybrid or full return to office schedule still, even with some of the layoffs that we've been hearing about. They're not matching up with availability just yet.
And Natalie, are you guys requiring that as well, or leaning towards that?
We have somewhat of a similar approach. It really is dependent upon the business need. So if the need ultimately is that this role will convert to a full-time employee, then they are required to be in the office, because we do have a hybrid policy. And so if, when they're engaging our program and they want the temporary worker to eventually convert, then yes, they have to be local and tied to an office. But if they have the flexibility and it's just truly project basis work and they're going to come and go, then we have flexibility with that, and then that way they're able to leverage, lower cost markets as well. So, it's really this like tug of war, right? Because, during COVID, we had this kind of free reign where we could hire talent anywhere, and it would help and assist with cost savings because you could go to those lower markets. But now, and I do live in the Bay Area. I live here in the Silicon Valley, and you can see just within the traffic, the RTO demand. People are in the office. There is a true demand, but everything that Jeff said, I agree with. And, we've taken, again, a similar approach, but we're giving the business a bit of flexibility if they do not have that conversion requirement at the end. They're not looking to make them a full-time employee.
Yeah. I wonder, so part of this return office is clearly for productivity, but I also wonder if it's because there's so many fake candidates now that's is a downer for fake candidates. They can't really pull this off as much, or they can't take 6 different jobs and get paid for the same rate.
Yeah, that's actually one of the key drivers that you'll see the drop off rate. Number one, in the interview stage, requiring camera on without excuse. Mm-hmm. And number two, if you are not able to physically present yourself for asset deployment, mm-hmm. then you don't get it. And again, the stats show, especially over the the past year where we saw a spike in the employment fraud or candidate fraud, you deploy a few of these things and you begin to see people significantly drop off throughout the period. It's a huge waste of time. It frustrates the managers, but it protects the organization.
Yeah, and then you probably don't get cost savings from remote workers because you just spend all this money on people that aren't working, right? Right. So if you go back and look back at the data. Kelly, what about your organization?
Yeah, so we're very similar to Natalie in terms of our preference. Our very strong preference is that people are local and tied to an office. We have a hybrid policy. Typically, it's 3 to 4 days a week that someone needs to be on site. So if there ever is that intention of converting them, either they have to be willing to relocate or they need to be close to a location. But if it's truly, we're using someone for a project or we're as a consultant, we do have flexibility there. And again, we can also leverage some lower cost markets in that situation.
Great. And Jake, you guys have done it for a while, right? You brought return office back a few years ago, I think.
Yeah, so probably the last 16 months or so, we've had, some components, and it has, slowly increased more and more, and changed our, hiring or procurement patterns. We are 3 days a week now for anyone that's local or within 100 miles of the office, but we have really focused the talent needs just in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. Very similar things to, what everyone else said, and, Jeff in particular, we've had, we've seen it at the beginning when we were one of the earlier ones to start to go back. But as many of the larger companies and the financial services companies in the area have went back as well or put some requirements in place, we've seen that, lessen and lessen. But focusing on local and with all the candidate fraud and everything else going on, going back to the old school of an on-site interview, it seems to be a going thing here. Just can't really fake it, face to face in person. So just trying to stay ahead of that as well.
For sure. And Chris?
Yeah, for us, it's definitely a mix. We've moved to return to office at least. It depends on schedules and teams you're on, but we have moved to return to office even for contingent workers in some sort of hybrid way. But at the flip side, we're also flexible. I continue to see that talent wins. If you really want the talent, people are willing to give them whatever arrangement they want. So for example, we have a few very unique individuals. Like we all joke about purple squirrels in this industry, but now I've actually met a few. For example, if you are a world championship tabletop card gamer, like Magic the Gathering world champion, a company like us is going to let you live wherever you want, and we'll basically match your whatever compensation you need to make sure that you're the one we're working with. Yeah. So I think there's continues to be that dichotomy as well.
Fair, and there's definitely exceptions, but I do think COVID, we all took it too far and brought everyone home, and then you just disconnected with culture and productivity on some level.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Ash, that I've been working from home for essentially 6 years for Salesforce before I took this role, and now I'm in office in LA, at least a hybrid setup, and it makes a huge difference. I forgot how much I actually enjoy being in a group with people I'm working with. Not all the time. I don't want to be here 9 to 5, but it makes a huge difference.
100%. How are you guys all adapting to the changing landscapes right now for the legislative landscapes? Is that factoring into any of your decision processes?
Yeah, definitely. So if you take a look at, I like to say, if you can survive and navigate California, you can largely survive and navigate anywhere in the world per se. But it has caused a lot of pressure on the team. Lots of new compliance standards, attestations, audits, remittance to state and local and federal government, country governments. So I think we really just have to remain at the ready to ensure that the organization is doing what it needs to do. Obviously, India is changing dramatically, and trying to take a look at how do we comply with new rules and standards there. So it's really taking a look at, for those of us that have an MSP partner as well as access to outside counsel, leveraging our internal risk teams and our internal counsel with other stakeholders to really prepare us, get us ahead of things, whether it's systematic or whether it's actual people to really ready ourselves. And so I'd say it's more of the same, but it does seem like the pressure to achieve compliance early and be ready for remittance standards that sometimes are very loosely written. We try to just do our very best.
Yeah, for sure. And Jake?
Yeah, echo a lot of what Jeff said. Our workforce is, mainly in the lower 48, so have, some leeway there. But for us, we've got a lot of inside counsel, a lot of inside resources that we're talking to. But I think it simply is try to be as knowledgeable as we can, have a plan. And, Ash, you touched on it with COVID and hiring, right? I agree. We went too far, right? So as it comes to some of this change in legislation or the rumors of changes in legislation, I also think it's important not to go too far, right? Or go too far down the road. But again, just be proactive, have that plan. And at the end of the day, it is a people business. So being mindful of that and all the decisions that are being made or the plans, being constructed, have to remember that human element and try to take care of folks as best we can.
Definitely, for sure. Does anyone else want to add to it?
I'll just add, one exercise that we've been doing are creating hiring guides. So really like carving out the various different things that our managers or, different parts of the ecosystem need to be aware of. So that's it's kind of, just to keep us compliant, to keep us safe. So for the countries that we're in, it's sort of like these guides or a matrix of the sort, just to let us be aware and make sure that the business is aware, especially of, certain legislation, especially outside of the United States, where it varies different, vastly.
Yeah, I agree. A large majority, I would say like 65% of our contingent workforce is in India. So we, especially in my role as compliance manager, it's always a challenge to keep up in regular times. And in these kind of last few months, it's been an additional challenge, just educating people, making sure that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And to add to that, I know that a lot of you guys are in the tech space. So is the H-1B renewal going to be an issue? Are you guys planning around that, or how are you handling that today?
It's not a big issue for our program. So we don't have really, I think, anyone at the moment on an H-1B. We've had a few individuals in the past, but no current active resources. So right now it's not something that we're worrying about. I know on the full-time side, our global mobility team is certainly impacted by this. And there has been a lot of triage with that team.
Fair.
Yeah, same for us. Same at SanDisk. I think maybe we have one or two people. It doesn't come up for us often. Luckily, but I think it would definitely be a consideration if someone were to come forward who did need sponsorship.
Yeah, I think I'll echo those both remarks with one caveat too, that a lot of we do have a number of visas within the contingent program, largely held though by some of the largest consumers of the visas, right? You can think of the mega companies, obviously, that are largely based out of India and have onshore operations. So they largely help us navigate those particular pieces. I think that, still waiting for the dust to settle on where the cost aspects lie and how that might impact either pricing, pass-through costs, or amortization over longer term engagements are all up in the air.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think we'll see. We still have another month before they actually come to fruition, but I can imagine that they'll create a tech visa that's not going to be impacted because this will affect everybody, I think, across the board. And if they don't, then it's going to add $50 an hour on the bill rate, right? Which is super expensive. So let's go into the MSP world. Everyone wants to be strategic. What does an MSP being strategic actually look like? And then to follow up on that, what do you expect out of your MSP this year, given all the dynamically changing environments?
I can jump in here. I think we all talk about this. Really, it's been very hard to find a MSP that can be seen as a thought leader or be a strategic partner. Oftentimes, I'm stuck dealing with just trying to make sure the operations, the day to day, are running smoothly. And I think, another problem can be is they run so lean that they don't have the ability to r- operate or partner at the level that we are looking for. If I'm looking for somebody to be strategic with me, they have all of our data, they have all of our insights. They are meeting with the business, right? It's helping us look ahead, really, like what trends are you seeing in our data? And instead of just telling me like overtime was really high in this one department. Um, we're looking for more insights and, rather than us taking the information and really being the ones to discern what's happening or try and paint the picture. It's hard to have that level of partnership sometimes. And then obviously like what we're looking for in an MSP would be more proactive, in coming to us with what is it going to be 12 months, 24 months down the line. Our business, how should we be operating, what are the changes we should be making?
Yeah.
And I spent 15 years on the MSP side of the house. And so I make sure that I don't necessarily have any expectations of our team that, I wouldn't normally have signed up for when I was on that side of the fence. And I think Natalie outlined it really well. I mean, we all talk about being strategic. What does strategic mean? And for me, it's getting ahead of things as best as possible, whether it's a change in the legal landscape or whether it's reading through the data that's there and saying, have you ever thought about, or I have another client that did this and it looks like it might be a fit for you. Bring to me thoughts and ideas to continue to move into the next generation of the program or get ahead of a possible problem. That's to me strategy. Mm-hmm. And I would prefer to have a good strategy that is 100% executable than wait around for the very, very best strategy that we could never get off the ground.
There.
Yeah, that's very true. I think I'll echo what both of you guys said. And also, again, because we're a new entity, it's been a challenge for any of us to get out of that day-to-day operational and kind of just get up and running. So, as we go into our second year, my expectations from our MSP would be, again, that strategic partner. And what does that look like? That looks like being proactive. That looks like, solutioning. I don't want to always have to bring a solution to the MSP. And like you, Jeff, I've got about 15, 16 years on the MSP side. So I know what can be done. I know, how things can be run if the program is appropriately staffed, et cetera. And on the other hand, I also have, I understand the struggles that they deal with as well. So it's a balancing act always.
So Kelly, I'm going to ask you a follow-up on that because you guys both, all three, everyone on this panel is pretty much a rock star and they have so many years experience of seeing everything at this point. So one, maybe they won't be able to bring more than what you guys already have in terms of knowledge. So that expectation is not going to happen. And the second thing is, now they kind of hit on this, is like, we've seen a push the rates down on the MSP fees, and ultimately they're in a business. And so maybe if you want the strategic part, you put that in a separate bucket as consulting dollars, and they can bring that to you. I don't know.
It's interesting because I try not to impart the fact that I have the 15 years experience onto them. I don't want it to seem like, I'm trying to manage how they're, working their program with us. But I also, want them to understand that I do understand the pain points, et cetera. Our contingent workforce program sits in procurement. So cost savings is obviously very important to us. And so it is always a balance of, there's things we could do if we want to spend money. Are we going to do that? Maybe not right away. And so I have to balance the size of our program, which is, relatively small. We have about 3,500 global contractors, not a lot of spend for our MSP provider. And I have to think about if I were managing that program on the MSP side, what level of effort would I be putting in? So it's, I have to have appropriate expectations, I'd say.
I think we need to figure out how to lower their cost to serve us, right? In the pressure of lowering the costs, and let's face it, I think we unfortunately reap what we sow. We send bids out, we have them compete against each other. They try to drive that extra, 0.1, 0.15% out, and we suddenly say, oh, there's savings. And what we're talking about is, savings on such a small amount of what we actually have here. So I think we need to really look at leaning out our processes, allowing them to, again, lower that cost to serve so the margin remains relatively stable, and then engage them on additional services, as you're mentioning, consulting and other areas, right, where fundamentally we might be able to direct some funds. But my biggest thing, going back to your previous question, is strategically, where can you guys add value and how can I bring additional work into your ecosystem? And I'm not necessarily talking rogue spend or anything else, but I'm talking about value. How can we drive that and bring it in?
Yeah, like service procurement, things like that. Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we hear this all the time of like, we on this side always say, well, my MSP needs to be strategic and we always need to look for that. But I frequently find people that tell me their MSPs are not strategic, but yet we all say we need one or want one. MSPs all say they're strategic. But then where's that rubber really meet the road? What does that actually look like in terms of execution is a really great question. I think to answer the other question as well was, for example, around the changing landscape around regulations and things like that. I need, if my MSP is strategic, I need them to sit down with me and say, hey, here's all the things that just went into effect. It's January of a new year. Here's all the things that just went into effect in these regions that we know you're operating in. We have your data, so we know here's X amount of headcount that you have in those regions that this now applies to. Mm-hmm. And here's the dollar impact or the potential risk you're up against if you don't make this change or that change, or like, here's a recommendation. That's the type of thinking that I would look for from them in execution. Not to speak specific about Riot Games, but just broadly in execution, that's been fairly hit or miss in my experience with various MSPs. On the same token, I fully recognize that we love to sit on the enterprise side and say, MSPs don't want to bring us much strategic things, but every time, or many strategic things or ideas, but most of the times when they do, we tell them, no, just keep doing your administrative stuff. Like, so it's this thing where we love to complain that they don't do the thing that we tell them not to do. And that always seems like a circuitous loop for me. I think to your point, Jeff, there on the margin and the costs, Ashish, I'm curious if you think the MSPs will start leveraging AI on the back end for all their manual administrative tasks, because that's stuff that AI is really good at. And if they are doing that, does that mean I get to pay less to my MSP for the same service, or is the MSP just going to expand their margin?
Well, if you want my recommendation, I think they are doing the back end piece so they can lower the cost of delivery, but then I would want them to use those dollars to hire the strategic person to give you the strategic advice you're looking for. Because if you just squeeze it out, then you're still not gonna get any. Like, they should move the low value stuff to become cheaper so they can actually hire more senior people to run the programs for you. That's my thought process.
Yeah, I think that would be smart. Yes.
Yeah, because I also I love that everyone's got a dashboard, but the dashboard is just data and doesn't tell you how to implement or what you should do with that dashboard. And so it's just a report for the sake of having a report. And I think AI, where I do see them doing stuff, is they're taking AI to say, okay, give me a recommendation that I can get my clients with. And so it's proactively looking at reporting and having solutions for you.
I think that'll be a big help to MSPs. I can't tell you how many QBRs I've sat in the last however many years where it's just what you're talking about. Like, hey, look, here's what our dashboard shows. And it's like, okay, but so what? Like, what does it mean if there's now 100 more people in this role in this random place in LATAM? So what?
Yeah,
like what's the flaws? Yeah, and I feel like these things are usually sold to us in terms of like, oh my gosh, we have the best business analytics, the best dashboard, and all these things. And look how pretty and beautiful it is, and et cetera. And I'm like, okay, great, but but what do I do with it?
100%. Jake, your thoughts?
So, and as you know this, we're internally run. So, a lot of the things that we're talking about are what my team is trying to do, enhance, and be better with on a daily basis, because we are, the individuals that have to be the, strategic business partner. But I agree with a lot of what, everyone said. I think, one of the big things that I've seen just even in conversations or, over 10 plus years of doing this is there is no one size fits all. One solution is going to be perfect for everyone. So those strategic partners really understanding the organization, the drivers, what ways we can incentivize them, because at the end of the day, if they do well, we will get more, right? More comes in, there's more areas of the business that we can expand to. But as everyone said, and I am a numbers and data guy, if you're just giving me a dashboard with numbers of, transactions and things without the story, or, you identify the bottleneck, that's great. But what can we do with that? How do we resolve it? We're paying, these organizations for the partnership. I think partnership comes out a lot of this of, don't just bring me problems or transactions, help me build the solutions or give me recommendations. And, I think as Chris touched on it earlier, then I think we owe it to them, right, to actually have a dialogue about it, try to find the middle ground and, how you can actually act, on some of those things.
Yeah, no, for sure. And speaking of that, so if we think about like not just strategy, but also like there's sort of regulations changing, there's deregulation happening too potentially this year. And then there's a push to move a lot of CW into SOW. And I think that's probably for a few different reasons. One is I think that we might have made the rules under contingent workforce too strict so that people don't want to follow them anymore. And so they're moving them into SOW, which I call some other work or service procurement. But then there's also like the big beautiful bill, which is allowing you to write off 100% of CapEx, which you could put SOW as a CapEx expense. So there's a massive cost savings from a tax perspective for an organization. So with all those things happening, are you seeing an increase in worker misclassification because everyone's breaking the rules now?
So, I mean, we're not, at FINRA, right? Financial regulator. We've got a lot of process, a lot of red tape, a lot of oversight, which is certainly a great thing. But I'll say it took a while, right, to get to that point, and the ability to be flexible and make sure that we are seen as this strategic business partner. So while it might be a headache for some or a lot of work to do the right thing, follow the right processes, if we try to make it as seamless as possible or to not be a burden to work with us, I think that's one of our overall drivers. If we get to have the oversight and control the intake, of whatever contract vehicle we're using, it goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. So it's more about the user experience to get
Yeah, here, right? I think that's a big one. And because again, if we can help them and actually just make it just as easy of, sending an SOW out the door and having it come through finance and those sorts of things, we can give them more oversight. We can give them more tracking abilities and all of those things as well.
Makes sense.
Ashish, I'm a big believer in making compliance easier than non-compliance. Managers are going to just do whatever they have to do to get the job done. So you might as well make it easier for them to do their job in a compliant way.
I love that. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, Chris, I'm going to echo that one. And I think the way you do that, quite honestly, is trying to get to a yes, right? What you need to work at the speed of business. You need talent in the door. We've spent the past, give or take, 2 years working with our security team, our risk team, our systems access team, all of them. And we've really squeezed the funnel down to both codify the types of engagements that are allowed, how that engagement runs, and whether it falls under professional services, outsourced managed services, or staff aug. And in working with indirect procurement and others, we're basically putting an artificial choke point, right, that says, stop, you can't do that based on these things. But we also have to be able to pick up those pieces to keep it moving forward, right, at speed. And our growth, if you look at us, we're 3 times the size in terms of staff FTEs that we were 8 years ago. All those new people coming in have different ideas of what they did at their company, their favorite agencies, right? All that creating those types of issues. So we're really working fundamentally to say, one entry point, request what it is you need. We'll do everything on the back end for you. Doesn't work perfect, but 2 years into it, we have full global census of every single non-employee worker in our ecosystem. who they work for, what they're doing. And now we're starting to move that forward into what lanes allow them to be onboarded quickly and compliantly. Wow, within compliance.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I would say for especially because we inherited a large portion of our workforce from when Western Digital, when SanDisk split from Western Digital last year, we kind of inherited whatever that classification was of that worker. And so I would say for us, misclassification is definitely a huge issue. And what we see is, we can have people potentially move from a time and materials to a statement of work because then they can get around some of our tenure restrictions. And so that's definitely something that is a challenge for us. And so it's a huge project because it's like, where do we even start to dig out from what's already there? Going forward, we have more controls over it, but kind of the existing workforce, I would say there's some challenge there.
So have you thought about getting rid of your tenure limit? Just because it's not, if I move into SOW, it's still a tenure limit challenge, right? It's not really.
Yeah, so we only impose tenure limits if someone is considered a temporary worker classification. So if they're anything else, like if they're managed service, if they're outsourced, external service, consulting, there's no tenure limit. And so that's kind of the loophole that people are kind of using, I would say. I would love to get rid of tenure limits. It's been honestly one of the things that we've had on the forefront of our discussions with legal and our internal ethics and compliance. And, we've been shut down. We need to have those limits in place for risk, according to our council.
Interesting.
And I actually removed tenure limits in a previous program. That's not necessarily always the right choice, but
right.
I worked with our employment counsel there and argued that people were ignoring it anyways, and it really didn't actually solve for the risk that everyone thought it did. So it just was a pointless roadblock for the company.
Yeah.
See, and we balanced it. So we extended tenure. And again, it depends, right? Different in US, different in other countries. But in general, we extended tenure, but we put teeth into the back end. So you can't obviate the tenure limits. There are many controls, whether it's shutting systems access and badge off, cutting off a PO, many ways to put the right pinch point in place. And so it might feel a little heavy-handed, but the behavior is beginning to change. We're having good discussions about how long is this project really going to go? Do you think you're going to go beyond this 10-year term? Will you have headcount to convert? Would you like to look at knowledge transfer windows? So it's starting to have a really good conversation almost around forecasting, not workforce planning, but forecasting within contingent workforce, which is great.
Yeah, I love that. And those are the conversations that we're having now. Again, it was, when you're trying to stand up a new program, really just getting things up and running and trying to even understand what the landscape looks like. That's the first, that's the first deal. And so now we're having those conversations, and it's just trying to correct behavior that I don't want to call bad behavior. I'm going to call it behavior that they didn't know better, and re-educating them, I would say.
Yeah. And I'll just add a few things here. So we don't have a tenure policy. We have a length of stay in countries where there isn't, a specific duration that we have to adhere to. And that gives us flexibility. That way, we're also not creating this culture of permatemps, where we've got people here for years on end as temporary workers. If somebody is integral to the business, if they are a rock star, then we want to convert them and make them a full-time employee. But it just gives us that flexibility, to not... I think, like Chris, you were saying, you're constantly making exceptions. In the past, I've seen programs that have these policies. It's like you're left and right making an exception. So what's the point of your policy? So we've gone with just a little bit, more flexible model, which is the length of stay. And then our program sits within the people organization, and we partner very closely with our procurement team that is processing all of the professional services, statement of work. And one thing that we do with our procurement team typically is yearly we meet with them, and we help to just train them on the different types of non-employees, and especially like what to look for in an SOW that would make it misclassified as staff augmentation. One thing that I was just talking about with our procurement partner is the platform that we're utilizing is going in and training the technology in what to look for in the SOW so that it will flag it to us immediately. So we're going to be able to start doing that so we can train the platform that our procurement team utilizes to start scanning our SOWs, looking for some of those red flags for us and tagging it to us. I don't think we have a ton of misclassified work. I think it happens in every organization where it slips through. But we do have a really strong relationship with our procurement team. I just had our commercial legal team send me an SOW yesterday to look at and see if it was staff aug. So we regularly have that happening, and we just have a really good partnership and relationship with that team. And also, the other thing I will say is the procurement process can be really lengthy. And if they're coming to our program for a temporary worker, we can get somebody in, a butt in a seat so much faster than if you're trying to go through the procurement process.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that from a user experience, if you're looking for speed, like our program is the way to go. You're going to be able to have that project start so much faster than if you're trying to go through let alone if you're making sure it's classified correctly. But if you're just looking at, the two different programs or the two different teams, we move so much faster. We have that ability. And I think that was pretty much all that I was going to add to everything. Oh, the other thing I will say is, we do classify our vendors and outsource service providers differently. We don't have any length of stay limit on them. But the one thing is that we are looking, if you're an outsourced service provider where we have partially or fully outsourced a service to you and you're meeting your SLAs and KPIs, you could be working with us for years on end. Whereas if you're a vendor and we've engaged you for a project work, you're going to come and go. But if we do monitor those vendor engagements, because if we see vendors working with us for years on end, then that's a red flag.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think Natalie brings up a good point, and I think Ashley goes back to some of our earlier conversation. I think front end orchestration tools are really paramount now, and the problem with that, of course, is just the fee stacking and the number of things to navigate. So integration in and of itself is necessary, but that front end orchestration, and as Natalie is saying, training, whether it's a decision wizard or some form of AI on the front end to help a manager navigate that system is ideal. Also making sure there's controls in place that they don't understand what the typical answers are to get the outcome they want. And then secondarily, is really, as Natalie mentioned, working so closely. We're an HR driven program, but dealing with our procurement folks is just really been a fantastic journey together so that we have eyes on all paper that's coming through. Mm-hmm. And again, kind of, as Chris mentioned, we're not trying to slow business down and be an inhibitor, but doing other things like making sure that contracts are signed on our paper and not an agency's. Everything is reviewed before a purchase order is spun up. All those things are checked and double checked. And again, if we travel the right lane through an orchestration tool, it should be speed to fill.
Yeah, absolutely. The next topic I want to kind of hit on is AI in multiple facets. So one is, and I'll just tell you from a vendor standpoint, clients will ask me in RFP, how do you use AI in your process? And then we explain that. And then the next question is, do you agree not to use it with us? And so our clients, are you guys thinking 2026, you want us to use AI in the recruiting process? And if so, like, how would you want your vendors to use it?
Yeah, I'll just say, I mentioned audits earlier. We are changing our security risk assignment on the front end, our assessment, to include certain questions like you mentioned, Ash. And really the next question then is that AI in any way, shape, or form linked up to our systems, right? Because if it isn't, it's a different conversation.
Sure.
I also think, as Chris mentioned, organizations need to be really, really careful about how much they say they're doing more automation, because then the next question is, well, great, your cost to serve is lowering. How does that come potentially back to me, right? So be really careful there. Honestly, I don't care if you're using one account leader and 100 bots or all the AI in the world, or you're using zero AI and lots of people. Mine is great talent, speed to fill, competitive price, right? That's not changed in the 31 years I've been here.
Sure.
I also think, though, that and we talked a little bit about this earlier on, right, is that all those great brains that are out there are running these every quarter 50-yard sprints in how AI can adapt and change and what it can do. And most of us are back just off the starting line about to undergo the marathon, right?
Yeah.
And so, yes, we have to understand on that spectrum, is simple automation tools like bots and agents the best place to be, right, in helping us? Where can we actually engage other chat tools and some of the newer AI that allows us to then also implement work rather than just query work? And then finally, sort of this last bastion where people tend to see themselves in the headlines of talking about. So it's a high risk. We're assessing it. We're making sure that there's certain firewalls and controls, but I'm not sure. I know all of you were also looking at ensuring we have notification of cyber incidents. We have annual audits for our ISO audits around controls. So again, it's creating, unfortunately, a bit more work for whatever it might take off. It's creating additional work on our MSPs, on our teams, to ensure that we're safe and secure in how it's used. So,
and I'll add to that. Honestly, like the AI I see AI having efficiencies on like matching invoices and doing like backend operations, but I have seen it with the recruiters. It's created. We now have to do a proof of human assessment because we don't know if the person's like a legit candidate anymore.
Or I'll even throw another one out there. So for years we have drilled into candidates searching for work into their head that they need to customize their resume to the job, which if they're applying to a lot of jobs is a lot of work to request of them when then 10 minutes later they get an auto notification. Thanks, bye. Now we're actually starting to hear from a lot of the recruiting teams that they're a little worried about the fact that there are customized resumes through AI. Correct. That the person is applying to 10 jobs with premier skills listed. So they've used tools to do what we've asked. And now we're actually pulling back saying, I don't know if Jeff is actually who he is, nor can he do any of these jobs. So it's a weird, again, dichotomy that's happening in the use of the tools.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's why you need proof of work and proof of humans. I think the resume is I see it kind of dying in the next few years because it's too easy to automate, like matching your resume to the job and sending it through.
I'll bring the shovel. I've been waiting for a long time. We have terrible job descriptions with terrible resumes, and somehow we decide that there should be a great marriage in there.
Yeah. In fact, I just taught a class like an hour ago about proof of work and just kind of showing like your project, your problem, action, and reasoning why you did it, and then the result. And that's going to be a way to sort of get around like these fake resumes to show me actually what you did. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, man, there's like 5 things here. I think for one, we've all got to use AI. Like it's too effective and too powerful. And if we're not going to use it, we're going to get left behind by people who are using it. I heard the great phrase of like AI won't replace humans, but humans using AI will. And just some of my own internal tools, like that have been authorized, enterprise wide, that I've been able to use. I'm able to turn around things that would take me 3 days within like, an hour. And it's like, okay, this is definitely very powerful. But to your point, it definitely becomes this weird kind of escalating battle, right? Of like, now the systems are trying to outsmart the systems instead of like humans talking to humans about human work. So there has to be some sort of balance there. At the end of the day, I always say this whenever I'm at like the CWS or any other conferences, is we exist as an industry to connect contract talent with employment opportunities. And if you can't explain how your technology or AI improves that process in one form or the other, then it's not going to be worth anything in the long run because it's not going to help us get where we need to go. So I think there definitely needs to be this balance of we need to lean into it, but also not just throw technology at people because that's going to quickly alienate candidates, going to quickly alienate clients, right? Like Ash, if you're my supplier here at Riot and you just keep giving me terrible candidates because you've unleashed the AI out there in the world that just is terrible at recruiting, you're going to quickly get removed from my program because your performance is going to suffer. None of my managers are going to want to hire from you, and your business is going to suffer. So it's going to sort itself out by who, again, best meets the value of good content, good contract talent with the people who want to employ them.
I love how you framed it about like you need context, and like if it's not helping you with it in the process, then don't use it because it's not doing anything. And so I think that's where, like last year, I think corporate America spent all this money on AI and gave everyone a bazooka, but they didn't tell them how to use it and what context to use it in. And so then everyone just started doing their own things, and we just ended up becoming less productive because we were just playing with this tool. We didn't know what to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought the same when I would see all these people announcing layoffs, and they're like people like, oh, it's, AI is just making us more efficient. I'm like, from what I've seen inside of companies, I don't know that's the case. I think you all just thought it was shiny and said, great, we now don't need 20% of our workforce. Goodbye. And it's like, that's not how that works.
Yeah. Kelly, I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah. So obviously, I echo what Chris was saying. If you don't use AI, you're going to get left behind. I think that there's just a caution still that needs to be used with it, to everybody's points. Like, we don't want to take jobs away from people necessarily, but we also want to make sure that, we're still doing the right thing and even checking to make sure the candidates are human. Is that a good tool? Yeah, probably. But do I care necessarily if my MSP or my partners are using AI in their recruiting process? I don't. Right now, I'm worried about just getting quality candidates and how quickly we can get those people started. But yeah, I think we'll see the AI landscape continue to shift and change just quickly.
For sure.
Yeah, and I would add to what Kelly said here I've had MSPs or other supplier partners that I was already working with. They're not trying to sell me, right? Come and say, oh my gosh, we're using AI. We're implementing AI. We're doing all these really great things. And I go, okay, what does that mean to me? Like what does that change for what you're doing?
Yeah. I don't think that they know sometimes. I think that they just get the shiny tool and they're like, as all of us, like, here's something new we can play with, but have you really thought through what the value is? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't think 90% of the time it's better. Like, sorry, Jake, go ahead.
Well, it goes back to what we had talked about too. Like, what does it mean to be a strategic partner or MSP, right? They should be bringing it to you because it's, hey, Chris, we're using this now so we can do X, Y, and Z faster. Or we can now recommend this solution or make things better, right? Because again, we've all gotten those pitches probably weekly, monthly, daily, even you need to use this new tool because it's going to make, X throughput, and it's, I don't believe you, right? You can't actually talk through and what the meaning is.
Yeah, no, totally. And there was I had this example. There was this I'm not going to name names, of course, but there was this background check provider that was going around really excited about their new background check system. It was like AI. It was like, it will go so much faster. Your time to fill will be so much better because you find people and you got to wait 2 weeks to background check, and nobody wants to wait the 2 weeks. Blah blah blah. So did enough due diligence with them and sat down with them that once we actually ran their process, it wasn't measurably better than just the normal human process. But it was like, oh, it's so exciting, so exciting. It's like, but it doesn't actually change that much. So it's like, why does that help us? And like MSPs that would come and be like, okay, but we have AI running this and this and this and this. I'm like, okay, but does that mean you now answer my questions faster? Well, no. Does that mean you now get me like invoice auditing faster? Well, no. It's like, okay, great, but also how does this benefit? And not that they shouldn't be using it, but it's also bring these things to us that actually change what we're doing versus just saying we're doing something.
Yeah, either a bit faster, more accurate, or less more compliant or something, right? It's funny, I have a story with this is a few years ago, but this MIT company called me and said, hey, we built this AI tool to help sourcing so that your recruiters can do more high value stuff, and these tools will learn how your recruiters work, and then they'll replicate them, right? In my head, I'm like, all right, well, some of them are good, some of them aren't. So I want to replicate all their behaviors. But number two, he's like, all right, so send me like 100 records of 100 resumes, and then 3 job descriptions and show you how it works. And I'm like, you can't do a data set with AI with just that little volume, but okay, I'll send it over to you. Next day, I have a company in India that's under a different name that has recruiters, and it's an RPO company. And so he hires 2 recruiters from me in India, not knowing. The next day, I sent him the resumes. He shows you what he can perform. And I was like, oh, dude, I misunderstood. I thought you were talking about artificial intelligence. I didn't think you were talking about American Indians doing the work. And he's like, you got to fake it till you make it. Like, I misunderstood what AI was.
Yeah, there was an extensive survey that came out last year where I forget, something like 2/3 of CEOs admitted to AI washing. We have AI in here, but we're actually not using it. And I think it's incredibly tough. I think the other thing too, Ash, and it'd be interesting to see actual results when you run a couple 100,000 or a couple million resumes, right? And I just might be called a dinosaur after I throw this out there, but when I think about the value of a recruiter versus, let's say, just a simple digital agent that's going to look at resume comparison, is a bullseye, right? If you are teaching an agent or AI to look for certain things, it's going to hit the bullseye all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is it's kind of like reaching down and grabbing a fistful of sand. The tighter you squeeze, you're losing some really good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So how does AI do what a recruiter does, which is infer through reading a resume or an interview that 1, 2, 3 degrees of separation of transferable skills of someone that's got the grit, right, to last in your organization, et cetera. And that's usually my question, right? When I sit down at conferences and people are pitching all the AI, and I'm saying, can you actually get inferred results and incorporate everything that's slipping through? And there's dead silence right now. So, I'll wait. Thanks for hitting the bullseye. But again, if I'm really looking, especially whether it's an issue of return to office, whether it's an issue of labor arbitrage in other countries, how are you inferring those additional rings of talent?
Yeah. Interesting. And Jake, I want to ask you about candidate fraud. This will probably be our last question because we're running out of time. But are you seeing candidate fraud increase as a result of these automated resumes? And how are you guys dealing with that at this point?
I mean, absolutely. And, the easy answer is the best that we can. But, a lot of it comes down to, I think, holding, my team accountable, but our staffing suppliers accountable too, right? It comes up in their performance evals and QBRs. But, internally, we've talked about, changing the pace of interviews, asking questions, off the page, as Jeff was alluding to, right? AI is great. AI can make it faster, more efficient in times, but how do you approach, engineering problems, really telling the story in a different format of, tell me this, and this really quickly and making it cohesive with all their other answers. But again, going back to the old school thing of trying to get people on site, right, off camera, to kind of do those final checks, it seems to be the one consistent thing that can't really get around, right? You can't necessarily fake it, or unless people are bringing in earpieces and all of these things, more power to them. But, and we've also struggled, right? Because a lot of the roles that we have are working and want full stack engineers, right, that are working with AI, can leverage great AI solutions. And then when they use them in interviews, it's, ethics come into play and accountability comes into play, but it's also, that person's really good if they can use all of these tools, this way and kind of get around it. So it's another one of those, dichotomy issues that we're still internally trying to evaluate ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, job creation is happening right now because of AI. Because from our standpoint, for our recruiters, they're now having to take the person's resume, match it to a LinkedIn profile, take the LinkedIn profile picture, do a Google search to see if their picture was stolen from somewhere else and see if it's a real candidate. And then ultimately and then look at their IP address if they're interviewing to see if they're here or in North Korea, and then see if there's a wrapper around their face that makes them look like they're an American. And then ultimately we find out that they're not real because we ask them, they're like, oh, Natalie, you're from Texas. What's your favorite restaurant in Dallas? And they're like, and I'm like, okay, that's not a real candidate, right? So it's
a story I heard the other day was there were managers interviewing a candidate, and they knew they had a deep, strong feeling that this person wasn't who they said that they were. And it's somewhere on their resume said that their native language was Polish. And so they asked them to explain whatever they were asking in the interview in Polish, and the person immediately dropped from the interview.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really interesting. And we've recently just gone through with all of our partners that support staff augmentation and audit, asking them, like, what are you looking at when it comes to candidate identification, and just looking at, like, in terms of IDs, the visual ID inspection, the biometric and video inspection, the digital footprint, all of the different components. And now that's going to be something that we add into the vetting process up front before we add a partner to the program.
Yeah, I think it's important for folks to know, and we found this out. Background checks don't verify identity unless you add identity verification to the package, which you all might know already. It was a large surprise a couple of years back, that we're verifying really documents against an identity, where we first have to start with the identity itself. So check with your background check providers, make sure it's built into the package.
Great advice. Kelly, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's definitely have to verify who you're looking at and making sure they're real people. And there's so many examples like Natalie was giving that it's just like, really? That's the problem is, I think, and I'll probably age myself here too, I think there needs to be an actual person talking to the person at some point. That's my thought.
100%. All right, well, this is great. Last question for everyone is, what are you most optimistic about CW this year? Jake, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think, and we did this last year, and my answer is almost problem. I think it's just part of why I love what we all have the privilege of doing. But it's new tech adjusting to the new normal. I think with technology and all of these issues, maybe it's kind of twisted of us, right? But it's fun, right? Trying to navigate these things, try to be proactive and thinking ahead, right? I think this year in particular, with everything that we just talked about, trying to anticipate as much as possible and start to put those processes or controls in place, along with new tech and trying out, new fancy things, is kind of where I'm headed.
Okay, great. And Jeff?
So I'll deviate from the tech and say that I very much, and one of the things that's held me in this industry this long, I very much look forward to our strong tier 1 partners and introducing Intuitive to get people jobs here. I just think that it's such a wonderful avenue, right, to bring talent in, to expose them to our organization. And we do a high set of conversions as well. So, when you close up shop for the day, so to speak, and you look at your dashboard and you fill a bunch of jobs, you've not just fulfilled the jobs, but you've put people to work. And I just think it's really fantastic.
Definitely changing lives. Natalie?
Yeah, I'll just go with, really ultimately, I think for us, it's really important to create amazing experiences, and figuring out the ways in which over the course of this year, we can continue to do that for every single part of our ecosystem. We don't care, solely about one little component of the ecosystem. We care about every single part of it, and making sure that, we're creating those great memorable experiences that people want to come back to, and helping our organization scale while we do that.
Definitely. Kelly?
Yeah, so I would say in general, for my specific program, at least, really getting to a place of strategy where we're, part of the workforce planning, part of the solutioning. We're not a mandated program yet with SanDisk, so people are often wondering why they should come through us, and it's those things that you're talking about: the experience of the candidates, the talent pool, the cost, also how quickly we can get people in. It's really, for me, evangelizing the program and making sure that people understand the benefits.
I love it. And Chris?
Yeah, for me, thing to ponder for 2026 that has some energy to it is, how do we bring in all the technology, all the AI, and also make this whole thing more human?
Love it. Well, thank you all. This is a great conversation. It's super engaging and enlightening. Chris, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Kelly and Natalie, I'll see you in San Francisco next week for the dinner. And Jeff and Jake, thank you so much, and we'll hopefully see each other soon.
Looking forward to it.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.